Welcome back to another episode of True Crime Untold Cases. I'm your host, Harper Quinn. In September 2012, Faith Hedgepeth was living the college dream at UNC Chapel Hill. A bright 19-year-old with aspirations of becoming a pediatrician, she was the first in her family to attend university and a proud member of the Halliwasaponi tribe. But after a typical night out at a local club, Faith was found brutally murdered in her off-campus apartment. A mysterious note left at the scene reading, "I'm not stupid bitch jealous," would puzzle investigators for nearly a decade, while a crucial DNA profile sat waiting to reveal her killer's identity. Tonight, we unravel the tragic story of Faith Hedgepeth and the 9-year journey to bring her murderer to justice. In the early hours of September 7, 2012, while most college students were sleeping off a typical Thursday night out, something sinister was unfolding in apartment 51 at the Hawthorne at the View complex in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Faith Hedgepeth, a vibrant 19-year-old junior at the University of North Carolina, had no idea these would be her final hours. Faith was special from the start. A member of the Halliwasaponi Native American tribe, she had overcome significant obstacles to become the first person in her immediate family to attend college. Her dream was to become a pediatrician, and those who knew her said she had the perfect combination of intelligence, compassion, and determination to achieve that goal. The night began like many others for college students. Faith and her roommate, Karina Rosario, decided to head out to a local Chapel Hill nightclub called The Thrill. Security footage would later show the two young women arriving at the club around midnight. They spent several hours there, dancing and socializing with friends. According to witnesses, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. At approximately 2:38 a.m., Faith and Karina left The Thrill together and returned to their apartment. This is where the timeline becomes crucial. Karina would later tell investigators that she left the apartment again at around 4:27 a.m., getting a ride from a friend named Jordan McCrary. She claimed Faith was alive and in bed when she left. What happened in the next few hours would become the subject of one of Chapel Hill's most intensive investigations. When Karina returned to the apartment at approximately 11 a.m. with another friend, they found Faith's body partially naked, lying in her bed. She had been brutally beaten to death with a rum bottle. The scene was horrific. Blood spattered the wall and pillows, and Faith had suffered extensive trauma to her head and face. But it was what investigators found next to Faith's body that would add an especially chilling element to the case. A handwritten note was discovered, scrawled on a bag from a fast food restaurant. The note read, "I'm not stupid bitch jealous." The writer had used a pen to imprint the message through the bag, suggesting a deliberate attempt to disguise their handwriting. The crime scene yielded other crucial evidence. Male DNA was found on Faith's body and on other items in the room. Investigators also discovered Faith's blood-stained clothing and a Bacardi rum bottle, which was determined to be the murder weapon. The bottle contained a mixture of DNA from two people, Faith and an unknown male contributor. The Chapel Hill Police Department launched an extensive investigation, collecting DNA samples from hundreds of individuals. They focused particularly on men who had been at The Thrill that night, or who had connections to Faith or Karina. The case attracted national attention, with features on major crime shows and news programs. The DNA evidence was particularly frustrating for investigators. While they had a partial male DNA profile, it didn't match anyone in their initial pool of suspects. This led to years of speculation and theories about who might have killed Faith. Some focused on fellow students, others on random predators who might have followed the women home from the club. The investigation revealed more about Faith's final hours through her cell phone records. At 3:40 a.m., shortly after returning home, Faith's phone was used to send a text message to Brandon Edwards, a male friend. The message was oddly worded and contained several misspellings, leading investigators to believe it might not have been sent by Faith herself. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Faith's family struggled with their devastating loss. Her father, Roland Hedgepeth, became a tireless advocate for justice, regularly speaking to media and keeping his daughter's case in the public eye. The Haliwa-Saponi tribe also rallied around the family, offering support and helping to maintain pressure on law enforcement to solve the case. The Chapel Hill community was deeply affected by Faith's murder. She had been an active member of campus life, participating in various organizations including Unheard Voices, a group that supported Native American students. Her death sparked discussions about campus safety and led to increased security measures in off-campus housing complexes. Investigators continued to pursue leads, but the case seemed to hit one dead end after another. They developed several persons of interest over the years, but none of them ultimately matched the DNA profile found at the crime scene. The note left at the scene suggested a crime of passion, possibly motivated by jealousy, but its exact meaning remained unclear. The police maintained that this was not a random act of violence. They believed Faith knew her killer, but proving who it was would require more than circumstantial evidence. They needed a DNA match, and for years that crucial piece of evidence remained elusive. As the investigation continued, detectives began utilizing new technological advances in DNA analysis. They worked with private labs and consulted with experts in genetic genealogy, a technique that had helped solve other cold cases. The hope was that these new methods might finally provide the breakthrough they needed to identify Faith's killer. The case would eventually take a dramatic turn, but not before years of anguish for Faith's family and friends, who waited desperately for answers about who had taken the life of this promising young woman in such a brutal manner. The question remained: who had been in that apartment in those early morning hours, and what had driven them to commit such a horrific act? The breakthrough in Faith's case finally came in September 2021, nearly 9 years to the day after her murder. Investigators announced they had arrested Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares, a 28-year-old Durham resident. The arrest stunned many who had followed the case, as Salguero Olivares had never been publicly mentioned as a suspect during the lengthy investigation. The path to his arrest was a testament to advancing technology and investigative persistence. Investigators had used a combination of traditional DNA analysis and genetic genealogy to narrow down their search. The male DNA profile found at the crime scene was run through a process called Y chromosome DNA testing, which traces paternal ancestry. This, combined with genetic genealogy techniques similar to those used in the Golden State Killer case, helped investigators focus their attention on specific family lines. What made the case particularly challenging was that Salguero Olivares had no obvious connection to Faith. He hadn't been a student at UNC, Chapel Hill, and there was no evidence he had ever interacted with Faith directly. However, investigators would later reveal that he had a connection to Faith's roommate, Karina Rosario, through mutual acquaintances, though the exact nature of this connection remained somewhat murky. The arrest affidavit revealed more details about the crime scene that hadn't been previously disclosed to the public. Faith's blood alcohol content at the time of her death was 0.23%, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. This suggested she might have been particularly vulnerable on the night of her murder. The autopsy report detailed the brutality of the attack. Faith had suffered extensive blunt force trauma to her head, face, and neck. The medical examiner determined that she had died from blunt force trauma and blood loss. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case remained the note left at the scene. Written on a fast food bag in ballpoint pen, the message, "I'm not stupid bitch jealous," had led investigators and amateur sleuths down numerous theoretical paths over the years. Some had speculated it was meant to throw investigators off track, while others believed it held the key to understanding the killer's motive. With Salguero Olivares' arrest, investigators began to view the note in a new light, though they remained cautious about publicly discussing its significance to the case. The arrest brought both relief and new questions for Faith's family and the Chapel Hill community. Roland Hedgepeth, Faith's father, who had spent nearly a decade keeping his daughter's case in the public eye, expressed mixed emotions. "It's a day I thought would never come," he said at a press conference following the arrest. "I didn't know if I would live to see it, but God kept me around to see it." The district attorney's office moved forward with prosecuting Salguero Olivares, but the legal process would prove to be complex. Prosecutors faced the challenge of building a case that went beyond just DNA evidence. They needed to establish a timeline, motive, and explain how Salguero Olivares had gained access to the apartment that night. The investigation revealed that on the night of Faith's murder, Salguero Olivares had been in the vicinity of the Thrill nightclub, though it wasn't clear if he had been inside. Cell phone records placed him in the area of Faith's apartment complex during the crucial hours between when Karena Rosario left and when Faith's body was discovered. As more details emerged, investigators began to piece together a theory of what might have happened that night. They believed Salguero Olivares had somehow gained access to the apartment, possibly through knowledge of its location via the connection to Karena Rosario's social circle. The level of violence suggested to investigators that the attack might have been sexually motivated, though they were careful about making public statements regarding motive while the case was pending. The arrest also led to a re-examination of the text message sent from Faith's phone at 3:40 a.m. The oddly worded message to Brandon Edwards now seemed likely to have been sent by someone other than Faith, possibly after she had already been killed. This detail added another layer to the timeline investigators were trying to establish. The case highlighted both the advances in forensic science and the importance of persistent investigation. The Chapel Hill Police Department had never classified Faith's case as cold, continuing to actively work leads and analyze evidence throughout the 9 years between her murder and the arrest. The department had maintained contact with various forensic labs and genetic genealogy experts, always seeking new ways to analyze the DNA evidence they had collected. The arrest of Salguero Olivares also brought attention to the broader issue of violence against Native American women, who face disproportionately high rates of violence and murder in the United States. Faith's tribe, the Haliwa Saponi, had been instrumental in keeping her case in the public eye and advocating for justice. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors began the meticulous process of preparing their evidence. They had the DNA match, but they knew they needed to present a compelling narrative that would explain not just who had killed Faith, but why. The community waited anxiously to learn more about the man accused of cutting short the life of a promising young woman who had overcome so many obstacles to pursue her dreams. The legal proceedings would reveal more details about both the crime and the investigation that led to Salguero Olivares' arrest. But for Faith's family, friends, and the Chapel Hill community, the most important fact was that after 9 long years, someone would finally be held accountable for her murder. The legal proceedings against Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares moved forward methodically through the North Carolina court system. As prosecutors prepared their case, they faced the challenge of explaining to a jury how a seemingly random individual had committed such a brutal crime against a young college student he apparently didn't know directly. The prosecution's case was built on several key elements. First and foremost was the DNA evidence, which provided a clear scientific link between Salguero Olivares and the crime scene. The DNA had been found in multiple locations: on Faith's body, on the murder weapon, the Bacardi rum bottle, and on other items in the room. The statistical probability of the DNA belonging to someone other than Salguero Olivares was astronomically low, making this evidence particularly compelling. Further investigation into Salguero Olivares' background revealed troubling patterns. While he had no significant criminal record at the time of Faith's murder, investigators discovered that he had been living in the United States illegally and had used various aliases over the years. This had complicated the initial investigation, as some of his identifying information had been recorded under different names in various databases. The prosecution also focused on establishing a connection, however tenuous, between Salguero Olivares and Faith's social circle. Through extensive interviews, they discovered that he had occasionally frequented the same bars and clubs in the Chapel Hill area that Faith and her friends visited. Several witnesses came forward to confirm seeing him at the Thrill on multiple occasions, though not necessarily on the night of the murder. One of the most significant developments came when investigators finally pieced together how Salguero Olivares likely gained access to Faith's apartment. They discovered that he had connections to several people who knew Corina Rosario, Faith's roommate, through the local Latin dance community. This social network provided him with knowledge of where Faith and Corina lived, though it remained unclear whether this knowledge was casual or if he had specifically targeted the apartment. The note left at the crime scene, "I'm not stupid bitch jealous," took on new significance as investigators delved deeper into Salguero Olivares' life. While he never provided a clear explanation for the message, linguistic analysis suggested it was written by someone whose first language was not English, matching Salguero Olivares' background as a native Spanish speaker. During pre-trial hearings, prosecutors presented evidence about Faith's final hours that painted a clearer picture of the sequence of events. After Corina Rosario left the apartment at 4:27 a.m., cell tower data placed Salguero Olivares' phone in the vicinity of the apartment complex. This timing aligned with the medical examiner's estimated time of death between 4:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. The brutality of the crime suggested to prosecutors that this wasn't simply a burglary gone wrong. The medical examiner's detailed report documented that Faith had been struck at least 12 times in the head with the rum bottle, indicating a crime of extreme violence and likely personal motivation. DNA evidence also indicated that there had been a sexual component to the crime, though prosecutors were careful about how they presented this information in court documents. Faith's family attended every pre-trial hearing, often wearing traditional Haliwa Saponi tribal clothing to honor Faith's heritage. Roland Hedgepeth, Faith's father, spoke outside the courthouse about the mixed emotions of finally seeing his daughter's alleged killer face justice. 9 years is a long time to wait, he said, but Faith deserved this. She deserved to have her story told and to have justice served. The case also brought attention to the role of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. The techniques used to identify Salguero Olivares involved creating family trees based on DNA matches in genealogical databases, then working backward to identify potential suspects. This method, combined with traditional DNA analysis, had proven crucial in breaking the case. As the case proceeded toward trial, prosecutors faced the challenge of explaining the 9-year gap between the murder and the arrest. They emphasized that investigators had never stopped working the case, collecting DNA samples from hundreds of individuals over the years. The breakthrough came not from new evidence, but from advances in DNA analysis technology and the expanding field of genetic genealogy. The impact of Faith's case led to changes in how universities approach campus safety. UNC Chapel Hill implemented new security measures in off-campus housing areas and expanded their Safe Ride program for students traveling at night. The university also established a scholarship in Faith's name, ensuring that her dream of helping others would continue even after her death. The Haliwa Saponi tribe used Faith's case to draw attention to the broader crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. They worked with advocacy groups to push for better resources and attention for cases involving Native American victims, creating a lasting legacy from Faith's tragedy. In the courtroom, prosecutors methodically laid out their case against Salguero Olivares. They presented evidence showing that his DNA was found not just in one location at the crime scene, but in multiple places, suggesting his presence throughout the apartment. They also presented evidence that he had attempted to clean up after the crime, indicating consciousness of guilt. The defense team faced significant challenges given the strength of the DNA evidence. Their strategy focused on questioning the timeline and suggesting that Salguero Olivares' presence in the apartment might have an innocent explanation, though they struggled to provide a convincing alternative narrative. As the legal proceedings continued, the Chapel Hill community reflected on the long journey to justice. Faith's professors remembered her as a dedicated student who had overcome significant obstacles to pursue her education. Her friends spoke of her infectious laugh and her determination to succeed. The impact of her loss and the long wait for answers had left an indelible mark on the community. The case served as a reminder that even when justice seems delayed, advances in science and persistent investigation can eventually bring answers. For Faith's family, friends, and the entire Chapel Hill community, the arrest and prosecution of Salguero Olivares represented not just the potential for justice, but the closure of a chapter that had remained painfully open for nearly a decade. The legacy of Faith Hedgepeth extends beyond the tragic circumstances of her death. She is remembered as a bright young woman who broke barriers, who dreamed of becoming a doctor, and who never got the chance to fulfill her potential. Her case serves as both a cautionary tale about campus safety and a testament to the power of persistence in the pursuit of justice.